Hello and welcome to another video. So today we're going to be taking a look again at a Omen portal deck. I've messed around with a few Omen portal decks now, and after looking through a fair few deck lists and trying a few out, I found that once you get the hang of a deck like this one, it does fairly well. Of course, we did know puppets were going to be fairly solid from the beginning because they're zero cost followers that destroy themselves, so you can easily boost Omen of Destruction, but I've also found that they can be quite aggressive, so using them in this fashion seems to work quite nicely. And of course, taking suggestions from everyone else, Neapolitan Entity is pretty much a must-have at this point. You need at least 2 in your deck to really compete with Blood, especially on the aggression side. I found as soon as you drop that, Blood players pretty much freak out and can't really do anything, which is pretty great. Otherwise, the only difficult matches tend to be mirror matches or rune matches. They can be the most difficult too. They're two that I haven't got to face a lot so far with this deck, but they're ones that I've found that when I have faced them, they've pretty much been instant loss for me. Mirrors mainly come down to purely luck, and everything else was pretty average, so definitely still pretty solid deck, seems to do quite well. It even gives Dragon a run for its money about 50% of the time, so definitely worth a shot. We're going to get right into it and take a look. And first up, we have a Dragon. That's no surprise at all, as Dragon and Blood are the top 2 decks. That's why we will be covering those in this video, as they have been reasonably common today compared to the last couple of videos I've done where Blood just wasn't quite as prominent, even though I believe I still had Blood in at least one of those 2, but that's fine. So we're starting off pretty early. We've got our Omen, which is pretty perfect, as in this matchup I find going for the Omen strategy better than just going for aggression, whereas you'll see in the Blood video, aggression is far more valuable. So a good early Hamlin will definitely help you out. Being able to duplicate any follower is always worthwhile with Hamlin, and it's a fairly decent 2-1 stated follower, so your opponent usually always loses out in the trades. So that's always a good way to start. So I do start by clearing out their board, really just clearing the way for our turn 4 play. Especially considering what they could play, it's really not going to be too much of an issue. So we have Omen on 4, pretty much a perfect setup at this point. This is exactly what we needed. Now it's just a matter of getting enough puppets to really decimate our opponent's boards. And how I handle this probably wasn't the most optimal way, but I still felt was reasonable enough. So they get their ramp, they've got some decent draw power, they're going to clear this 3-4 pretty comfortably, but they're not left with a lot, so if I had have played this turn a little bit better, I probably should have went for Hamlin into Puppet. That way I could have got a little more value out of those, but I still feel like Kookaroo was a decent turn, even with a Puppet, as it does get me a similar board state, probably a little bit better honestly because we've got decent bodies, but I just felt like Hamlin could have then been used in a more functional way, at least looking back on it. Either way, if they destroy both these followers, we are going to get Distraction in white onto the board next turn. I've found that turn 6 seems to be the average that I can drop Distraction in white, so that's fairly consistent. Destruction in black can be a little more tricky based on your opponent's board and hand, but getting white out is usually pretty quick. The only problem I've had so far is having to be careful of amulets. So Neapolitan will want you to discard Destruction, which is disappointing if you haven't got it on board. So just trying to be careful of that is always a difficult factor to keep in mind. So all we've got to do is deal with this board, which, I mean, we've got multiple options at this point. I was tempted to just go for the Destruction and wipe them out with 10 damage, but I thought we'll hold off on those in case they drop something bigger like Irons that we need to deal with. So I went for Kookaroo. This will both drop Destruction in black, put a solid body on the board, and allow us to duplicate more cards, so why not? And at this point, if they destroy both of these, we're going to be able to get Destruction in black on the board as well. They did go for the Izdraha play, along with the Craving. Definitely a rough turn, but we're still going to be able to get Destruction in black onto the board, I think, which is fairly decent, and we're going to clear this off while keeping our Kookaroo. So we couldn't ask for a better turn there, and pretty much an instant concede from the Dragon player. So while we certainly could have lost last game if they had a decent Apostle combo to go off, we still had a pretty good chance of winning that, and there wasn't really other plays that would have been in our favour, so definitely worked out pretty positively. Next up is this blood matchup. I did throw away the entity, probably the wrong move to start with, so getting lucky is going to be important now, as I should have kept in mind that I was playing against blood. For some reason I just, you know, looked at my mulligan, didn't even think about my opponent, and just threw away a card that I really should have kept in my hand at least. But we start off again with a decent Hamlin on 2. I still find that's probably one of the better 2-drops to play. Of course, Flower Doll can be just as good if played on 2, especially against blood. Luckily, we did pull another entity, so that's going to help us. I always drop entity on 6 against blood every game, as long as I have entity, of course. We're not always going to have it, but I find that about 7 to 8 games against blood out of 10 that I tend to have entity on 6, so always decent. Now we're dealing with this 4-1. We don't want them to heal at all. The less healing they can do, the more aggressive that we can be, which is good. Alexandrite Demon. Not too much of a problem card, at least, luckily. So in the blood matchup, typically I completely negate the Omen, don't even care about it. We spend evolves getting pressure to the face, and that's pretty much it. We've got a very solid Spinaria play, as she's going to do very, very well in this matchup, being able to kill off the 4-1 for basically free. So we've got our Neapolitan entity for next turn, and since they're most likely going to kill the 3-4, substitution is going to be probably the most optimal play. So we're going to be able to get even more damage to the face. Of course, that isn't our only option. And sorry, not next turn Neapolitan, turn after, because we've got to keep in mind it'll be their turn 6, not ours. So we're actually free to pretty much do whatever we want this turn. Which I decided to not worry about using Otherworld here, because I wanted to use the Evo on the 4-7 so I could get that in big stat line. And we could easily pick everything off and build the board at the same time, so we weren't really concerned with it. So here we go into a Bloodkin. Disciple of Lust, Servant of Lust. So that's 2 pinks to their face. Disciple of Lust will make it 3. Oh, sorry, 4. So that actually was 4. I must have missed the very first one. They also get Omen of Lust. This is the only problem we've had now. We would have been set if Omen of Lust didn't hit the board. They didn't decide to actually attack with that, which might have been a small misplay, but not one that really affected the game too much. They might have been able to save themselves 1 health here. But we have to drop entity. That's pretty much our only option at this point. I also decided to clear out the 4-1 so there's no more healing, and so we could go face pretty comfortably. The ping also a little bit in our favour. All we need now is to be able to get 1 damage to their face outside of Sylvia, and we would have won. So, fortunately, pretty much instant concede on 7. Not much they could really do. So I found this deck does extremely well in the Dragon and Blood matchups. You just have to get kind of used to the playstyle, and of course you do need a little bit of luck. Being able to obviously get to the entities and the substitutions in your Blood matchup, and then in the Dragon matchup, getting your Omen and decent generation of puppets are your kind of keys. So as long as you can mulligan for those, you're usually pretty set. So if you guys enjoyed this video, you'll find the deck list to this deck in the description below. Until next time, see ya.